Alright, breezy, overcast day here at Pescadero. I'm going to do a wave painting today. It's a 2 foot by 4 foot wave painting. I've been wanting to do a larger scale wave painting, but honestly, the logistics of the whole thing kind of intimidated me. Let me show you what I've got here. The 2 foot by 4 foot panel is a homemade panel, and it's masonite with my typical gesso mixture on there, and then I built a cradle for it as well. I'll show you more of that in a minute. I am going to be using my Anderson easel. I included a square that I made for the horizon, and then my usual palette and my normal equipment in my backpack. I'm going to see if I can get all of this down to the painting location in one trip. Alright, so I've managed to find a spot that's not too windy. I found that if I set up along the cliffs, it just seems to be a little more protected, even though the wind is directly at my back. If I were to walk down closer to the water, it's pretty windy down there. But for some reason, up closer to the cliffs, it's actually pretty nice. So a couple things I want to consider here when painting larger. Number one is to make sure the composition is right. I'm going to need to walk back quite a ways, probably 30 feet, just to make sure that the composition is working. On a bigger panel, when you're up close, things get distorted and it's a lot harder to judge things like composition. So that's one thing. Another thing today I want to keep in mind is that it is overcast, and the values are pretty high values today. So I don't know if it's going to be like a high key painting technically, but I do want to keep the colors or the values sort of like a mid-tone or higher, possibly. And what else? I guess that's really it. I brought extra white paint, a big thing of liquid, and slightly bigger brushes. All right, so I've got the Anderson easel, and as I mentioned, a 2 foot by 4 foot panel here that I made myself. This is masonite here with 3 coats of gesso. The final coat has some pumice in it for some tooth and grit. And then I also attached a cradle to the back using industrial adhesive. This is just like 1 by 2 inch Douglas fir. My usual palette of colors, although I do have a couple guest colors, cobalt teal, and then also some transparent yellow oxide. This can be handy for sand colors, and then the cobalt teal for bits of aqua blue in the white water. I do have a full container of liquid here. I just use an old like vitamin bottle. As for brushes, I've got some number 10 natural bristle flats, and then also I think this is a number 6 synthetic. All right, so I'm toning with burnt sienna, and I've got a 1 inch cheap brush from Lowe's here. I'm going to try using this for toning just so I can cover the panel quickly, just staining with odorless mineral spirits. All right, so there is composition, and I'm going with a high horizon because there's not much going on in the sky, and just try to quickly map out a wave pattern. I do like having some diagonal right along the water line here. All right, so first I'm going to mix up a color for the sky, and I'm going to pay attention to values Notice how the whitewater is much lighter in value than the sky. My palette is a mid-tone gray. I didn't paint it a mid-tone gray. It's just sort of from cleaning it over time, it just naturally became sort of mid-tone gray, but I use that to gauge my values. So I'm going obviously with lighter than mid-tone here for the sky, and I'm using titanium white, ultramarine blue, and burnt sienna. And since I've got more area to cover, I'm mixing up more paint, thinning with liquid, and using a number 10 natural bristle flat. And I'm gonna try to paint this painting in about the same time that it takes me to paint, you know, a smaller painting. I know that's not, it's pretty ambitious, but there really is no need for me to take extra time on this as far as I'm concerned. Just need to use a bigger brush and maybe just paint a little bit more aggressively. I'm sure some of you are wondering why I didn't just pre-tone the panel. And the reason is I actually like painting on a panel that's slightly damp with odorless mineral spirits or with the tone. It just takes the paint better, and it's easier to paint on than a dry panel. All right, so next I'm mixing up a color for the water. I'm starting with a mixture of titanium white, ultramarine blue, phthalo blue, a bit of burnt sienna, and also some alizarin crimson. And I'm paying attention to values here, making sure the relationship between the sky and the water seems accurate. Trying to work quickly. I do like to work quickly and then look for, you know, things that happened accidentally or just sort of spontaneously. Little magic moments. And I do want to keep this painting loose and energetic. I don't want to, you know, because it's larger, I don't want to, sometimes you can, you know, you can end up painting it too tight. I want it to look loose from a distance. That's pretty good. Water's a little greener in here, so I'm going to add some yellow. And I think I'll go with some yellow ochre. Add a little yellow ochre in there. I may have to put down the camera at some point here just because I want to sort of paint with abandon here and a lot of energy, and it's so I may need to, yeah, I may need to put the camera down. We'll see. I mean, I'll still be filming, but it won't be the handheld situation. All right, let's see. All right, that's looking good. All right, so there is the scrub in. I'm mostly looking for compositional issues at this point, and I do feel like I want more. I like this breaking wave here, but I want there to be more. I want it to go further over, maybe, just a little bit. And there are some random bits of unpainted panel, you know, that I always try to leave areas like this and look for whitewater patterns within those spaces that I might want to build on. So for the whitewater, I'm using titanium white and a bit of ultramarine blue, and it's just in a very slight tint with the blue. And I'm just going to kind of scrub this in quickly. Taking your time with waves it doesn't work. It does not. They don't look as good as if you just, you know, scrub them in quickly. All right, and this is the area over here that I erased. One thing that's kind of a problem over here is there's none of the orange, which I really like, although a lot of that'll get painted over. There's a little pop right there. But you can see how much more, you know, like vitality there is when there's a bit of that orange coming through, as opposed to over here where there isn't any. Okay, so at this point the block-in is pretty much done. So I'm going to stand back from the painting and compare, you know, the painting to the water. The one challenge I've got right now is that there's direct light on the panel. That is definitely a problem because when I get this thing inside, it's going to look a lot darker than it looks right now. So it's very difficult to judge values in color when there's a lot of direct light. So I may try to turn it so that it's in shadow. Even though it's overcast, there's still a lot of, you know, filtered sunlight on there. It's pretty bright. I do need to darken some of the values. As you can see out here, the white water really does stand out from the darker water. As I mentioned, when this painting is indoors, there is going to be a bit more contrast, but still I do feel like I need to push those values a little bit. This number 10 natural bristle flat is working fine. The process is not really that much slower. It takes about the same, maybe a little bit longer. I think the biggest challenge is making sure that the composition works. I see I've got issues here along the water line, not a problem. So I'm gonna get back, you know, quite a ways and see, you know, and maybe see what I need to do to change it. The perspective on the bottom there, on the bottom wave, it looks too steep, so maybe I need to change the brush strokes in that. I think would help. So right now I'm just going to experiment with putting brush strokes in here that'll actually make this seem flatter. I do want some, you know, almost vertical energy in the foreground here, and then I want it also going off in this direction. All right, so that does flatten it out a bit. I think one of the biggest challenges with painting is, you know, you'll see something in your painting and you'll think, okay, that's not right. Something's wrong about that. But the challenge is, or the problem is that you don't know what's wrong. And so that's where I think doing touch-ups at home or trying to problem solve on paintings that don't work out really pays off when you get out into the field, because you know, then you can start solving some of those problems quickly. When you're plein air painting, obviously you don't have as much time to, you know, you can't like spend an hour on one problem. I guess you could, but it's easier to do that at home with a failed painting or a painting that didn't work out. All right, so that's reading a little bit better there. I had to focus on the painting for a bit there. So I basically came back in and reinforced color. Like for example, in the distance here, I noticed it was more of a blue color compared to the green of the waves. In this area, I noticed there was a lot of purple. I think a lot of it is rocks or seaweed or whatever, but it makes the water look purple. Also, I experimented with having some of the foam going up the wave In the past, that's been a challenge. What I ended up doing was using vertical strokes. When I used horizontal strokes, it didn't really look right. And up close, it doesn't really read as foam, but as you get back, hopefully it does. And one thing I noticed also is that the foam is not quite as bright as the white water. For the white water, I used a mixture of titanium white and ultramarine blue for some of the, you know, it's not really a shadow, but it's just to create some sort of warm, cool variety in there. And then I came over the top with titanium white with some cadmium yellow lemon. So now I'm just doing some cleanup, and I'm noticing, you know, certain things that I want to touch up, like for some reason this little bit of, you know, right here kind of sticks out to me. I'll probably knock that down a little bit. Maybe like that. Down below, I'm going to put some titanium white with a bit of cadmium yellow lemon in it. Still trying to keep the strokes spontaneous. I don't want to spread this out. That's looking a little bit. So now I'm going to put some sky reflections on the wet sand using titanium white and ultramarine blue. Getting that two-tone effect, you know, the darker purple underneath with the sky reflections on top, kind of makes it look like it is wet. At least that's the idea. Okay, so there is the finished painting. There's a bit of glare on it, but that gives you the basic idea. All right, so painting this wasn't that much different from painting a smaller wave painting. The process is almost identical. I just mixed up larger amounts of paint than I normally would. At first, I mixed up a pile of paint for the sky, I think, and I was like, wow, I'm gonna need a lot more paint than that, because I wanted to mix it in one batch so I'd have a certain consistency across the sky, or, you know, when I did the water in the back here, same thing. I wanted to mix that pile of paint up all at once. So I was mixing, you know, about 3 times, you know, the amount I would mix if I was painting smaller painting. And then I did try to work quickly, you know, the same as I do with a smaller painting. And I did need to get back much further to kind of judge the overall composition and see how things were working. So probably walking back about 30 feet, especially towards the end where I was, you know, applying the sky reflections over the surface. And to kind of, you know, go over the process again, I know I've talked about this in previous videos, but I always, you know, approximate the color of the water by looking at the waves. So when the waves come up, you're seeing the actual color of the water. And then along the surface, when it becomes flat, you're seeing a lot of reflected, you know, reflected sky, or you're seeing like reflected white water right in here, that sort of thing. So you've got those two colors going on, a darker base color that's the base color of the water, and then the reflected sky or like reflected white water. I even put some reflected white water down along the wet sand as well. And some, as you guys saw, like reflected sky along the wet sand. So that's really it. Just, you know, that initial scrub in is kind of loose and fun, and then yeah, just, you know, you're just looking for interesting patterns basically. So it is very much an abstract painting. I am always looking at the ocean for color inspiration and shape inspirations too, just like looking at the shapes of the waves as they break. Actually, somebody did come by when I was painting this, and they, you know, they were wondering why I wouldn't do a painting like this in the studio. And it just, this would not have happened in the studio. It couldn't have happened from a photograph. Try taking a photograph of the ocean sometime and painting from it. It's just not inspiring. At least I don't find it inspiring. So, so I'll be doing more of this. It was not, like I said, it really wasn't that much more difficult. There was a certain time there where filming and talking, there was a critical part there where I just needed to focus, and I couldn't hold the camera and paint or whatever. But again, you know, I always do the best I can to share as much of the process. And even if I can't show it to you, you know, with the camera, I can tell you what I did. And then if you viewed all my videos, then you're going to see all of my process, maybe in bits and pieces, but you know, you'll see it all eventually. And I will do a larger painting as well. Definitely going to do another wave painting like this. In fact, who knows? This could become my normal size. One thing I'll say, when I put it up on the easel and then I walked back to see it inside of an indoor space, it just looks, there's a presence and a power to a larger painting that I think is really exciting. And so yeah, so I'm going to do more of these. I want to have some of these in my house, actually. All right, so anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you'd like to see some extra videos and help support the channel, there's a Patreon link down below, and it's the Patreon support that helps me keep making these videos. So if that sounds interesting, check it out. Other than that, stay creative, and I'll see you guys in the next video.